kick off the conversation and introduce myself and our team. So my name is Alana Ojibwe. I'm the program manager at the Center for Justice Reform at Vermont Law School. And I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity to talk with you all today. And just wanted to give a quick extra thank you for our team, Bobby Sand, Lindsay Pointer, Taylor Long, Stephanie Clark, who are going to be helping sort of behind the scenes today as well. And also special thank you to Kristen Parker, who's one of the students in our program and really was the one who introduced this connection in the first place. So thank you to Kristen. So quick wave from the team. Thank you all for your help. And Katie Merrill as well, who's the Director of Admissions at Vermont Law School. Thank you, Katie, for your help today as well. All right, so before we get started in this discussion, I just wanted to mention a couple quick kind of housekeeping points. So we're going to start with a round of introductions and then head sort of directly into just opening it up for question and dialogue. We really want this time to be kind of more open discussion with you all, and looking forward to that. But before we do that, I just wanted to mention, so for folks who are joining, if you have questions, could you please put them in you'll see at the bottom a Q&A box rather than the chat. It just helps kind of filter through what's a question versus a comment a little bit easier, and we're going to do our best to get to as many of the questions as possible. So I think that was really it for housekeeping. I also just wanted to mention that we are really hoping to keep this to just about an hour today, and recognize that that time will probably go by very quickly. And so I will put my email in the chat if you have other questions or questions don't get answered today. Please feel free to follow up with me, and I'm happy to sort of serve as a point person to get in touch and pass along that question and get back to you. So I will put that in the chat so you have. And so I'd really like to get into introducing the four of you. Martina, Tom, Jason, Christy, thank you so much for joining today. We really, really appreciate your time and look forward to this conversation and hearing from you all. I want to just mention before we go into introductions that we did ask for everyone joining today to have seen either or both the Redemption Project episode or have listened to the podcast. So the hope is for everyone to at least have that as some context. So I just say that to say, however that impacts how you'd like to introduce yourself, feel free to share whatever is coming to mind. So with that, if we could start maybe with Tom, and then we'll just pass around. If you could share a brief introduction of yourself and your relationship to others on this panel. And another additional question, just for fun, because I think you all obviously know a lot about each other. So I'd like to ask another question about what was one thing that you loved doing as a kid that you still love doing today? Just one thing. So I'll pass it off to you, Tom, for an introduction.
Well, Tom Morgan. I'm currently an attorney for the state of California for the Department of Corrections. For 17 years, I was a county attorney for Kern County, and for 17 years before that, I was a sheriff's deputy for the county of Kern. It was in my position as a sheriff's deputy that I met Jason April 14th, late at night, behind a house in my neighborhood beat where I worked. Needless to say, Jason's on the panel. We're good friends now, but at the time, we were basically trying to kill each other. And he very nearly did kill me. My wife, Christy, is also on the presentation. Of all those that were injured by this, she was probably injured the worst, and has had the most amazing transformation from that moment in time. Martina was the facilitator for the victim offender dialogue between Jason and I, and she is also a dear friend and one of the most amazing people I've ever had the privilege to meet. And of course, there's Jason. I take it for granted to some degree how well he and I get along now and how much respect I have for him. But every once in a while, I catch this flash about how we initially met and wonder and reflect on the distance that we've come and all that we've learned in the interim. One thing that always sticks out to me is that how much of a tragedy it would have been had he had to remain in prison for the rest of his life, which was his indeterminate sentence. What I love to do now, that I loved to do as a kid, was ride my bike. And I've never lost the joy and fascination with that method of transportation. Anyway, that's all I've got.
Thanks so much, Tom. And we'll pass it over to Jason.
Hello, my name is Jason Samuel, and I am 42 years old. Spent most of that time inside a prison doing a life sentence for attempted murder on Tom. At the time, Tom was an officer. That's how me and Tom met. And like he just told you, we had a tragic situation in the backyard where we was trying to kill each other. And ultimately, in the end, we became close friends. And I ended up meeting Christy, Tom's wife, 18 years later, which was at a dialogue where I was meeting Tom. And me and her became friends after that and had our own dialogue. And during this time, I met Martina. She was the one that hooked the dialogue up where I was able to meet Tom and also Christy. So she facilitated the whole process, what made it easier for me to be able to do that. And so we also, all four of us are very close. I try to stay in contact with everybody here. So, yeah. And my favorite thing I like to do, what I still like to do, I like to play. So I go out a lot and play around, have fun.
Thanks, Jason. Pass it off to you, Christy.
Hi, my name's Christy Morgan. I'm Tom's wife, and I met Jason, like he was saying, about 18 years later at a the name, forget it. I forgot what I was going to say there, but I had gone through about 20 years of a really deep depression after Tom got shot. And I also resorted to using pills to medicate, self-medicate, because the pain was so, intense. I just couldn't deal with reality. And once I met Jason, and basically, when I saw the person who he truly was, I was able to forgive him. And all of that depression has left. I mean, I haven't experienced a day of it since that day I met Jason and forgave him. And I believe it was God who stepped in there and took away my depression and also my drug use. So, and Martina, of course, facilitated all of that. And she was very gentle and careful in the way she kind of introduced Jason to me by showing me pictures. And it really helped, I think, when I was able to meet him, to fully forgive and accept him. But it's all come full circle. As a child, I loved to ride bicycles also, and I still do that today. And I also like to bake. When I was a child, I baked some, and today I bake all the time for friends and family. Basically, anybody I can find who will eat something that I bake for them.
Christy, I heard about that hobby. That's actually what made me think about this question from listening to the podcast. So I'm curious to see some pictures of that. So want to also pass it off to Martina.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I see there are a lot of people on somewhere out in the ether. Nice to meet you all. Yeah, so I am a victim offender dialogue facilitator out here in California. I've been doing this work since 2015, and I now am so fortunate to be the victim offender dialogue program steward / director, depending on who I talk to, for the Ahimsa Collective. We're a restorative justice organization in the Bay Area and do a lot of cool stuff, bringing people together who have been harmed in multiple ways. We do in prison work. We have a reentry home, and then we do the victim offender dialogues. And now we're also starting to do restorative justice processes in the community. So we're all, and when people ask us what we do, we're now saying we're just about healing. And I would say, yeah, doing this VOD, and this is right how I know Christy, Tom, and Jason. That was because it was filmed, and now you get to see it, which actually really contributed to the incredible healing power, because it gave Christy a chance to watch Jason from a little further apart. So, and I still do VODs. I have to do a lot of, logistical words, but this is where my heart is. And I like to say that this work is from the worst of who we are as human beings to the very best of who we can be. And you get a taste of that today.
And Martina, was there something about you?
Oh, my childhood.
Child.
Yes. I used to do a sort of high dive. When I was a 12-year-old girl, I would hang out with the 16-year-old boys and, jump off. We only had a 10 feet diving board, but I still love diving into the water. Maybe don't have the courage anymore to do 10 feet, but if there's water that one can dive into, I will do it.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you all so much for sharing those introductions. We do have an initial question that I think is posed to Martina. So I'm curious if you can start this conversation, but I would also really like to hear from Jason and Tom and Christy, your thoughts on this as well. So the episode, the Redemption Project episode, obviously focuses primarily on the three of you and really specifically Tom and Jason, obviously, and shows a very brief snippet of what I know was a much longer process to get to the point of where that film brought that moment to. So I'm curious, Martina, if you could describe your perspective of what's involved in preparing for that kind of dialogue, and for those who are tuning in who don't know, the VOD is the victim offender dialogue process. And so hoping, Martina, you can just share a little bit more on, from the facilitator standpoint, what preparation, how did you work with these three to get to that point? And then following that, curious to the three of you, what wasn't captured in the Redemption Project episode? What was going on in your lives in that lead up of that process?
So yeah, there is, for one, there is no cookie cutter approach to how you prepare. Every dialogue, every conversation is extremely unique, who the people are. Here in California, it's always victim initiated. So we know many people inside prison who would love to do a face-to-face meeting, but they don't get to initiate it. So that is very important. It also doesn't show up in their in their files that they have done it, to really keep the motivation very, very clean, that it's just about healing. And then the preparation is whatever is needed, to really surface what the survivors are really looking for. They sometimes think they know what they want, but as we start digging, they realize, oh, I actually might need something very different. And what we're looking for, so as facilitators, we really want to understand what happened from both parties. So both parties tell us what happened, right? And there's the one reality and the other reality. And we hope that they overlap. When they don't overlap, we have to figure out how we're going to deal with that. And then the other thing we really look for, I always imagine the other person, right? If I talk to Tom, I had Jason sitting on my shoulder. Imagine how is he going to hear it? So we're looking for things that are might really difficult to hear, that then we want to process ahead of time. So that's a huge one, to make sure that there's no harm and that people are not emotionally overwhelmed. And then the other really big one that we try to do, so this is, a lot of rehumanizing each other and seeing each other as humans. And the more trust we kind of establish between the folks in there, seeing each other in their humanity, the more open people stay. When people are very suspicious and don't trust the other, right, and have core beliefs about what happened and who the other person is, there's less change possible. So we're really supporting people to be open and, allowing the possibility that particularly the person who's caused the harm might have changed, because they have, right? A lot of these meetings happen like 20 years later, particularly in homicide. Sexual harms are a little different. So I think I'll leave it at that, since there'll be many more questions.
And Tom and Jason and Christy, do any of you have thoughts on your perspective of what was involved in the process of just getting to that point where you did all come together?
Well, for me, it was a lot of studying. I did a lot of reading trauma books. I did a lot of writing and understanding. I did a lot of studying for a long time to get prepared. But I was preparing for years though. It wasn't just when I met Martina. I've been trying to better myself for a minute. And by the time I met Martina, I would just own it already. So it would just gave me that extra drive that I needed to get to the next level. And so whatever she asked me to do, I just did it. Whatever book she gave me, I read it. Whatever assignment she gave me, I did it. That was the only thing. And I just followed every rule she asked me to do. And it just so happened it was successful. So it was a lot of mental stuff going on at the same time, because it was a lot of pressure at the same time. Like, you feel like your whole life is on the line. If it don't go right, it's just, you're going to be stuck in here forever type feeling, but so you want to put your all into it because you want to be successful. At least I want to be successful at everything I do. So I put my all into it. So once I did that, it was easy.
I think were you done, Jason? I didn't.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
First, I forgot to say this when we started. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to the Vermont Law School for inviting us to speak. I really look forward to these opportunities to kind of share our stories. So thank you all, and thank you everybody participating. Now, one of the things that frustrated me about the process was that the victim offender dialogue wasn't something I learned about until after Jason's second parole hearing. And this was right around 20 years after the offense. I don't, I can't honestly say that we would have been prepared to do everything that happened any sooner. But we were never given that chance because of that tension between protecting the victims from the offenders and, protecting them both physically and privacy wise. To me, it seems like there must be some sort of compromise that would allow an offender who would like to engage in a dialogue to somehow communicate that to the victim survivor without interfering with those kind of legal impediments that have been put in place to protect the victims. And that I think I know of other circumstances where there are people serving, life terms who would do anything for the opportunity to apologize to their survivors, but their survivors, at least under the current climate, will never even know that they're remorseful because they're legally prohibited from contacting them. And I didn't know that before we entered into this whole thing. That was probably one of the, the things that I found most frustrating about the process.
Thank you all. Christy, did you have anything you wanted to add? Sorry, you're muted.
Sorry about that. When Tom decided that he wanted to meet Jason, I was, I didn't mind that he wanted to do that, but I didn't want to be a part of it. I wasn't at the same place that Tom was. And so as he started going through the motions and meeting with Martina, I just decided, well, he needed like a helper person. And I decided I wanted to be that person, which meant that I was going to need to go into the prison, into San Quentin. But in retrospect, that allowed me, because they were filming it, I was able to watch Tom and Jason's meeting on a monitor. And it allowed me to see Jason for who he really is. I mean, had that not happened like that, I don't know that, we could have ever had like this relationship that we have now. Just seeing him and his interaction with Tom, it just made me realize that this person who I had thought was a monster all of these years was this human being who had all of these feelings and emotions about what had happened. And he was truly sorry. I wanted to reach out to him so badly when I saw how much I had misjudged him. And so that's when I asked if I could go out and meet him during that VOD. And I'm so glad I did. He's just a sweetheart. I love him.
Love you too. Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you all. A next question that came up, I think this is specifically for Tom and Christy. How has your view about punishment changed over the years? And Christy, you're...
For me, it has changed completely. When I was asked to write a victim witness statement, I think it's called, and this was when Jason was on trial. And I remember saying in there, I was so angry and so hurt. I remember saying that really, I wish that there was like he could receive the death penalty or something. And of course I don't wish that now, and I don't believe in the death penalty, but all of that anger and hurt that was built up inside is now gone. I mean, it's just gone, and it was tremendous. So again, I give all the credit to God.
I without getting too far afield on this, the idea that we can modify people's behavior by punishing them, to me, I've come to believe that that's fundamentally a waste of time and resources. I see people that enter into the criminal justice system, and the criminal justice system is basically a form of violence against the people that commit crimes. And I think that they, at some level, understand that the state is using violence to punish them. And when I say violence, I mean that more in a broad way, not specific physical violence, but it's using violence to punish them for their violence. And I think that on some level makes it difficult for them to accept that the penalty they get is legitimate. In other words, that they look at the actions that are taken against them and they think, well, how come the system is doing to me what I'm being accused of doing to someone else? And I just think that is the wrong way to go about getting people to act in a socially acceptable way. I think it encourages anger and hate and violence, and gives too little attention to the things that we have in common. When I was able to hear Jason speak 20 years later at his first parole hearing, I met a completely different person than I had thought I had met at the time of the event. I had, a cop's view of, somebody who breaks the law at the time it happened. But in the intervening 20 years, a lot had gone on in my life. And when I was able to hear the life that he had led up to that point, when he tried to kill me, I was filled with, an empathy and understanding of his circumstance and why he had done what he had done. And, at that point, to me, the punishment, I almost regretted that what we had done to him by, what I had done to him by sending him away to spend 20 years of his life, when he had committed the crime as basically a young man or a juvenile. And it's remarkable that he was able to, kind of carve something positive out of all of that, which, was one of the things that really impressed me. Yeah, that's kind of how I would answer that question.
Much, Tom. There's a question for you, Jason, about, I'm actually just going to read it. It'll be easier than summarizing. So I was moved by the filmed VOD and know that there must have been hours of behind the scenes prep as well as actual dialogue time. However, I was also quite troubled by the background context of racialized trauma and tensions, poverty, police violence, etc., that Jason had alluded to when he spoke of his previous hatred of cops, and just wondering if that came up in the original VOD and or since that time. So I think this question really kind of speaks to, there was very brief mention of that, both in the Redemption Project episode and also in the podcast, but curious to hear more about how that background context that you mentioned, Jason, came up in the VOD process.
Well, for me growing up and being a Black person is naturally, we grew up not, despising the police, like from my house, from my mama, from everybody, aunties, you was raised not to talk to the police. And so that's what we didn't do. We didn't, whatever happened in the house, it stayed in the house. You got into it with somebody, you got into it. We didn't do no calling the police. So when I got older, I understood why, because I was going out more and I seen officers doing things to kids that wasn't supposed to be doing. And so I understood. But that's just something that in our neighborhoods, that just goes on in everybody's neighborhood. It's not just mine, it's everywhere, And so I'm not, it's probably more people that was just terrified of police and probably don't say anything about it. But like now, like I see on the TV or the media or some type of television where they're saying now that they're afraid of the police, and it's no communication that's going on with the officers in the community, because they're not there for the community, they're there to arrest you. So yeah, and it's like a you also have where if you not arresting people, what you're gonna do with them, like the people that are committing crimes, what should be done with them. But everybody commit a crime for a reason. Either they're addicted to drugs or something that went on in their life that had to do with some type of trauma, and they never dealt with it. So they continue having repeated trauma on top of trauma. So they're dealing with it with drugs or alcohol, sex, crime, whatever they're dealing with their trauma with, instead of actually dealing with the trauma by talking to someone about it. And so that's why crimes mostly be committed or jealousy or greed, but somebody's sleeping with somebody's woman or they're jealous of this person, so they kill them, plain and simple. It's not over gangs and drugs like people think, it's over women. And that's just the facts. But I still don't trust the police. I don't deal with them. I deal with, people that I can trust, So if I know you that I can trust you, if you're police, that's cool. I'm not discriminating against you, because I don't want to be discriminated against myself. But I don't go, I'm not trying to, get pulled over and I'm not trying to go through none of that, But I understand that it's still going on out here, where they're still out here killing Black people. So until the end, I'm gonna still fight for my people to, try to make it better. And that's why we're here today.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Jason. This is a question for you, Christy. I'd love to hear elaboration from all, but specifically for Christy, about what the process was like to have a film dialogue. Although it was obviously successful, how did the cameras change the process, and what challenges did that pose?
Okay. I kind of alluded to that earlier, but had they not been filming that, and had they not set up a monitor where I could actually watch what was going on, if I hadn't been able to see Jason, to hear what he said, I don't think I would have, I don't think I would have ever wanted to meet him. It was like that changed everything for me. It allowed me to see his humanity, which I had totally just wiped clean. Like, he was a monster to me. I hated him, and I also feared him. But when I was able to see him and listen to his words, everything changed for me. And just the feeling that I had so misjudged him all of those years came kind of crashing down on me. And I just felt this need I had to go talk to him and let him know that I saw the work that he was doing and how much I appreciated that. and that I forgave him. You know, it seemed to me he needed to hear that from someone. And I wanted to offer him that. So that the fact that that was filmed changed everything for me.
Thank you. Martina, there's a couple questions that I'll just put together in one question for you. So the first is, are there any protocols that you use to make this dialogue a safe and brave space? And another question was wondering what books you suggested for Jason to read.
Let's do the easy one first. So the books. So we do, right? This is called Victim Offender Dialogue, which we have inherited from CDCR. We would probably call it face-to-face meetings or healing conversations. Really understanding, right? We first don't experience violence as the person who's caused it, but as being on the receiving end. So we know that the people inside have all been victims, right? So really doing away with the binary of victim and offender. So, and that's part of our preparation work, right? Is because there is often the question of the why, right? Why did you do this? And we want to use the opportunity for people to gain more insight into what they have done. So the books were about, I don't know, was it Waken the Tiger? You know, Levine, and then Nonviolent Communication. And then he also because we are doing in prison, these insight and accountability groups, a lot of the work that he was asked to do was reflect on his childhood. You know, what happened to you that then allowed you to, you know, first live the lifestyle that you ended up living, and then also, you know, killing another, or, you know, willing to kill another human being. So that's that. And then protocol, how we are. So I think the Ahimsa Collective, we are, you know, when I hear protocol, we're so relationship based. We're really, you know, it's about, you can feel it between the fours, right? There is a real strong bond. It's a really intimate procedure. And we do things that, you know, it's very therapeutic, but then we're not therapists, and we do things that, you know, like I'm getting ready to do a really extreme domestic violence VOD on Monday. The two facilitators and the victim, we're going to spend the night together in the hotel because she is afraid. She's so anxious. So, well, why don't we spend the night, right? So I think the protocol is, it's not a protocol, it's more how we show up. And that is deep listening and looking at what are the needs. And taking time and giving time. I think that would, if, you know, yeah, protocols somehow doesn't work, you know, and it's really the going deep into relationship and creating safety, right? We want people to be comfortable, to be safe. We want for us to know them so that we can be of support when their nervous system, right? Because this is very emotional, intense. So we want to know the participants really well so we can support them to stay calm and be present to what needs to be said, and to not get triggered to a point where people either get reactive or shut down. So that's, yeah, so not so much, you know, there's steps we do, but I wouldn't call it a protocol. Like, as I said, there's no cookie cutter. It's really about the relationship we establish with each other.
Thank you, Martina. One quick follow-up for you in particular, in thinking about sort of safety to support this process. Could you just speak to why this is a process that's important to be victim initiated rather than responsible party initiated?
Well, it comes down to the safety, right? So, and empowerment and self-agency. So we do, that is another core principle that we work with is self-agency, right? As a facilitator, I'm right. To facilitate means to make easy, but we really want to center the people in for them to have agency. And we have done some processes that ended up not really being victim initiated. And it was really, really challenging, and people need to be ready. People need to want this. And particularly and this is what we have noticed. So I've done this for 7 years. I've, facilitated 30 VODs myself, and then talked to a lot of people who were asking for a dialogue. The survivors who come, what they have done is, they have taken self-agency. They have said, whatever happened to me, I don't want to be defined by that. And have mostly been on some kind of healing journey. So they really don't come with all the anger and hate that you feel in the beginning. And that, to work with people when they are in their anger. We just had one with a young man who was killed. So this has only been 3 years, gang related. And we're realizing she's just not ready. She's not quite ready to meet with him. And which is partly also the culture. I think if there was more culture and people knew, oh, this is something you do, right? This is something you do, and then it'd be easier. But right. So, and if there's no accountability, right? So this young man doesn't have accountability. So there are few things, right? And this is restorative justice, right? Restorative justice really doesn't work when there's no accountability, so to say, right? We don't, if somebody says, I didn't do it, it's very difficult to do the restorative justice process of bringing people together. So, and yeah, survivors, it's just much more work. Let's put it that way. It's much more work to really bring people into their own self-responsibility and their own, because it's even, right, even if somebody did something to you, and you're still responsible for yourself, right? You're responsible for how you feel and what this other person has done to you, the pain you feel. And that is a lot of the healing work, right? We do a lot of work then with survivors when there's no accountability. How can you heal without accountability? And that comes back to, that self-agency and self-responsibility. I don't know how well I answered that, but.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. This is a question for Tom and Christy. How would you respond to people who say about your situation, oh, I could never forgive someone who tried to kill me, or that's great, you found peace, but I could never forgive someone who shot my spouse? When this restorative process illustrates never say never. And I think the question is really looking at sort of what advice would you give to someone who just cannot see the possibility of forgiveness? What advice would you offer them?
See, the thing that's kind of hard for me to explain is that for me, it wasn't about forgiveness. And I truly believe that forgiveness is something that the person who's doing the forgiving does for themselves. Because forgiving someone else doesn't really change them. It may or may not have an effect on them. And so I think forgiveness, the value of forgiveness is to the person offering that forgiveness. With me, I actually told Jason at his second parole hearing that I didn't think I needed to forgive him, that if he thought that if that was something that he wanted or that would be of value to him, I'd be happy to do it. But to me, he and I at that moment in time were products of our environment. I knew my environment at the time, intimately. I'd, grown up, gone to school, lived in the neighborhoods I lived in. I went to the police academy. I learned how to be a cop. I knew it was a dangerous job. 10 years before that night, I'd been stabbed by a subject that I ended up shooting and killing. So I knew it was a dangerous job when I got into it, and I knew the job. What I didn't understand was how Jason was in a very similar position to me, in that he was also a product of his environment, of his training, of his education or lack thereof, of his family circumstance. And that in many ways, in fact, maybe in most ways, it trained him just as effectively for that moment in time as my life had trained and prepared me for that moment in time. And in some ways, what happened between us seemed to me almost inevitable. We'd both been set on this trajectory long before that night. And the circumstances and that trajectory led us to that moment in time when I tried to arrest him and he pulled the trigger. And once I realized that, once I understood that, to me, I didn't feel like I needed to forgive him, because it seemed he was so much a product of his environment, or he was as much a product of his environment as I was of mine. And with that insight, I couldn't, how do you blame somebody for the way they have, been raised in their life? We focus on the violence, but that didn't come in a vacuum. That was the result of something. Why did he have a gun with him that night? Why did he feel the need? Why was he, living on the streets? Those were the problems that we should have solved long before that night, that would have, intervened and not left me with a bullet in my neck and him, spending life in prison.
Christy, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, for me, I did need to forgive Jason because, he had harmed the person and almost killed the person I love the most in this world. And there had to be that part of it for me to move on. And Tom's right. When you forgive somebody, it's like it benefits the person that's doing the forgiving. And so in answer to your question, like how do you react to people who are not, they don't think they can forgive? I would just say, until they walk in your shoes, and we don't really know how we would react. And if someone had told me like 10 years ago that I would end up forgiving Jason and we would become really good friends, I would have said, there's no way I would ever do that. Yet here we are, and I have. And it all goes down to communication and seeing who the other person is. And because that's what everything hinged on for me. When I saw Jason for who he really is, instead of what I had conjured up in my mind that he was, it changed everything. So I would just say, all you can do is share your story, share what happened with you. And if people can't accept that, that's on them. They're the only ones who can change themselves.
Thank you. And then I wanted to pass it over to Martina to answer this question as well.
Yeah, so I've worked with a lot of survivors of severe violence who have forgiven. And, we have survivor groups who are, and we've talked about this topic a lot. And kind of what everybody says, for one, it's a choice. And then what often comes up is, the saying, anger and hate is like drinking poison and hoping that the other one will die. And for most of them, the journey has been, I don't want to be angry anymore. I just don't want to be angry anymore. It's hurting me. And it's not who I want to be. So there's a letting go. And then what do you do instead? And that's how they kind of end up in forgiveness. And Mama Jean is a little Black woman whose son was absolutely brutally murdered because his father happened to be a Vietnam veteran who learned how to torture and taught his son something. So it was really brutal. You would never think that this could be forgivable. But she said to him, when she stood in the room, she said, I had to forgive you for me. Now I'm here to forgive you for you. So, and that's what we found with many people. There's like the question, who do I want to be? And they want to be, like one person said, I did not want to live with a bitter heart, because we have to live with it. So it's really not about the other person. So often when it starts, it's about who do we want to be? And that's, I think, what I would tell them. And with the, if I may say too, so in our groups, we do make the case for self-forgiveness of the people inside who have caused violence, because we believe that self-forgiveness is actually a matter of community safety, because people are going to come out, and if they're going to hate themselves for what they have done, if they're shame-ridden for what they have done, they are much more likely to hurt somebody else. Because self-forgiveness and forgiveness lives in the realm of love. And love is kind of embracing everything, and a much gentler energy than hate.
Thank you so much. I'm going to do my best to kind of consolidate some of these questions. So there's quite a number of questions looking at offering some variation of a restorative process for different audiences, and thinking about sort of different scenarios of what could have made a difference earlier on, or thinking about different people involved in this process if they were included. So one question in terms of thinking about how much going through this VOD process has impacted your life and your experience. This is, I think, primarily Tom and Jason. For Tom, what sort of lessons, and this probably has happened, how do you carry that forward in talking with other law enforcement officers in thinking about what the role of restorative justice can be? And Jason, what are your thoughts on sort of ways that restorative justice could or should be used at earlier intervention for youth?
Okay. Well, I think, like, for me personally, I think it should start young with having emotional intelligence, because a lot of kids go through a lot of emotional intelligence, and they don't know how to deal with their emotions. So they usually do what they're taught at home. If they're taught to hit, that's what they're going to do. If they taught to pick up something, throw something at somebody, that's what they're going to do when they're frustrated and don't know how to get the words out. And so if we were starting young, we need to start it in schools all the way up to colleges, teaching them about emotional intelligence. Because if you know that if your brain is not fully developed till you're 25 years old, and so if you had this training in your brain, but when you're very young, when you're 4, 5, and 6, by the time you're 15, 16, you should have enough emotional intelligence not to be able to use a gun or be able to inflict violence on somebody, because you know how to use your mouth instead. But we're not teach a lot of people not taught emotional intelligence while they're young, and so that's why a lot of people act out in violence.
If I had any advice, it would be, based upon my experience in the VOD, it would be that we need to I guess it sounds kind of obvious, but we need to listen to one another. We need to be able to do something to put ourselves in the shoes of the person that we're interacting with, no matter who you are. It was, in some ways, it's astounding that it took me 20 years to realize, what I realized during that first parole hearing about Jason. He said one thing in particular at his first parole hearing that stuck with me, and it's kind of to one degree what prompted a lot of the change in my thinking, and that was he always looked at cops as just another gang, and that one statement caused this huge paradigm shift in my mind, because I thought, okay, if that's who he viewed me as and why he reacted and treated me the way he did, then, what things about me am I doing that he doesn't understand, that, if I was able to explain them better, or we were able to interact more, more as one human to another, instead of one symbol to another, how much better off, might we, actually be. I've watched Jason speak to young adults, probation wards and detainees, and you can really see the value of his experience in speaking to them. I mean, those kids, they hardly even knew I was in the room, but they gave Jason their undivided attention. And, the value of that exchange, the value of that understanding, I don't think you can overemphasize it enough.
Thank you all so much. So I am mindful of time, but there's one question that I think would be a good one to close with. There's a question about, would you all be open to a follow-up video that shows the healing and amazing relationship you have now?
Of
I'd
course.
say yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, I think this circumstance, could heal so many people that don't either realize that, how deeply they've been harmed. Martina spoke about the anger, that kind of lives in people that have been subject to violence, and that goes for both sides. And I think the image of, Jason, Christy, and I standing together, or interacting, it's hard for me to imagine that wouldn't at least prompt some people that are, being consumed by that anger to, consider that maybe there's an alternative. And you can't tell people what to think, but if you show them how you think and how it affected you, and people were able to see that, I think that, I'd be very interested in doing something like that.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your time and your perspective and your thoughts with us. I can't tell you how deeply appreciated it is, and I couldn't agree more that I think that your story is so important and speaks to so many levels of hope that I hope continues to be shared across the country, across the world. I think it's an incredible story that so many of us could benefit from hearing, and really serves as an inspiration. So it's been a pleasure talking with you all again. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording.